The heart monitor beeped steadily, a rhythmic reminder that I was still alive. The IV slowly dripped into my arm as I lay there, staring at the sterile ceiling, trying to ignore the pain from my surgery. My body was on the mend, but my mind was restless. I'd been here for 3 days, recovering from a procedure I never asked for, but had no choice but to endure. Then, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Dad. I hesitated before answering. We weren't close anymore, not like we used to be. I'd learned long ago that my father, David, only called when he needed something, and I wasn't in the mood to hear whatever excuse he had lined up this time. But something nudged me to pick up. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his tone too casual. "How are you feeling?" I shut my eyes, frustrated. Rarely did he ask how I was doing. I should have known that this was just the calm before the storm. "I'm fine," I replied flatly. "What's up?" There was a pause before he said something that sent a chill through me. "So, I used your college fund to settle some debts. It's not like you needed it, right?" I shot up so quickly, pain shot through my abdomen. I gripped my side, trying to steady my breathing. "What?" My voice was surprisingly calm, as if I were watching this whole conversation happen to someone else. "Yeah, well, things got a little tight. You know how it is. I figured, well, you've already done some college, you're smart, you'll figure it out." He said it like it was nothing, as if he hadn't just confessed to stealing years of my hard-earned savings. I had worked since I was 16. Scholarships, part-time jobs, tutoring gigs, every dollar I'd saved up to make sure I could finish my degree without drowning in debt. That money was meant to pay for my last 2 years of school, the final stretch toward graduation, and he took it without a second thought. I tightened my grip on the phone, my heart pounding in my ears. "How much is left?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Another pause. Nothing. It's all gone." I exhaled slowly, my mind racing, but my voice didn't betray me. It was eerily steady. "I see," I said, silence on the other end. Then a chuckle. "That's my girl, always practical. Look, there's no point getting upset. What's done is done, right? I mean, it's not like you can get it back, so might as well move on." "Move on?" I glanced around the sterile hospital room, the IV in my arm, the bruises on my skin from the needles, the cold, white walls. That college fund wasn't just about tuition. It was about my future. It was my independence. And he had taken it with the same nonchalance as if he'd borrowed my car without asking. "Good luck with that," I said simply. He laughed. "See? That's the attitude. I knew you'd understand. Anyway, gotta run. Meeting some friends for drinks. We'll catch up when you're out." And then he hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. The room was suddenly too quiet. The weight of everything that had just happened hit me. I should have been crying, should have been panicking. But I wasn't, because I knew something my father didn't. I wasn't a little girl anymore, and this time, I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I picked up my phone again and opened my banking app. Just as I'd expected, the account was empty. 0 balance. Every last cent had been spent. But he'd made one critical mistake. I'd always been careful, always prepared. And while the main account was gone, there were other accounts he didn't know about. A backup plan, because when you grow up with a father like David, you learn early on that you can't trust anyone, especially family. You learn to never rely on anyone. You always prepare for the worst. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. But I was going to make sure he regretted ever thinking he could steal from me. As I lay back down, the pain from my surgery faded into the background. There was a fire in my chest now. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The moment I got home from the hospital, I didn't waste any time. I wasn't about to sit around grieving over what my father had done. That was the old Sophia, the one who used to think that family meant unconditional trust. This new version of me? She knew better. Still sore from the surgery, I limped over to my desk and opened my laptop. The hospital discharge papers were still in my bag, barely touched. But this? This was the real priority. First, I logged into my bank account. Empty, just like I had expected. But I wasn't just checking the balance. I was looking for the pattern, looking at the withdrawals, the timestamps. Each transaction was another piece of the puzzle. My father had been methodical, draining the account bit by bit over several months, staying just under the threshold that would trigger fraud alerts. Classic David. He always knew how to stay just out of reach of the system. I took screenshots of everything, the withdrawals, the dates, the amounts. Then I opened my email and pulled up the old scholarship records, the ones that proved I had earned every single cent in that account. The next thing I did was send an email to my bank, requesting an official statement of all activity over the past year. David had made one critical mistake. Yes, he was a co-signer on the account, but the money had been mine. And if there was one thing that banks and courts didn't like, it was evidence of financial abuse. I could almost hear his voice echoing in my head. "It's just money, kiddo. No need to get all worked up." But no, Dad. It wasn't just money. It was my future, and he had no idea what was coming next. I turned my attention to my remaining savings, my real savings, stored in accounts my father didn't know about. I'd learned early on to keep secrets, and when I got my first real paycheck as a teenager, I made sure he would never have access to everything. It had started as a precaution back then, but now it was my lifeline. I swiftly moved all my remaining funds into a new account, one completely under my name at a different bank. Then, I changed all my passwords, set up two-factor authentication, and double-checked every security measure to make sure there wasn't a single loophole for him to exploit. By the time I finished, my finances were completely out of his reach, and that was just the beginning. I knew my father too well to think he'd stop here. He was already spending the money he'd stolen, and I had no doubt he'd find himself short again soon. That meant another call, another excuse, and more lies. So, I waited. Sure enough, just 3 days after I got home, the phone rang again. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, as if nothing had happened. "You settled in okay?" I played along, keeping my tone neutral. "Yeah, I'm feeling better. What's up?" He sighed, dragging it out dramatically. "Things have been a little tight. That college fund, it wasn't enough to cover everything, you know." I gritted my teeth. The fund he had stolen from me had been over $50,000, and somehow, in just a matter of weeks, he had blown through it all. I had to bite back a laugh. He was predictable, something I was counting on. "I see," I said, keeping my voice steady. "So, what do you need?" There was a slight pause before he cleared his throat. "Well, I was thinking you're always so good with money. You wouldn't happen to have any other accounts, would you? Just something small to help your old man out?" And there it was. My father had stolen from me, lied to my face, betrayed my trust, and now he was back, asking for more. I let the silence stretch on, making him sweat. Finally, I spoke. "I don't know, Dad. Maybe we should talk about this in person." I could practically hear the relief in his voice. "That's my girl. Let's sit down, just you and me. No need to get anyone else involved, right?" I smiled to myself, though he couldn't see it. "Right," I said. "Oh, Dad, you really think I'm going to let you walk away from this?" This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about consequences. And for the first time in his life, David was about to face them. I agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe in town, not because I wanted to see him, but because I needed to look him in the eye. I needed to hear the lies, one last time. The moment I walked in, I spotted him right away. David always carried himself like he was the most charming man in the room, but today there was a nervous edge to him. His knee bounced under the table, and his fingers tapped against his coffee cup. I took my time walking over, making him wait. When I finally sat down, I gave him a polite smile. "So, Dad, what's so urgent?" He chuckled, trying to seem casual. "Sophia, honey, why so formal? Can't a father have coffee with his daughter?" I tilted my head. "You called me here because you need money." His smile faltered for a moment before he quickly plastered it back on. "I mean, yeah, things are a little tight. I figured, since you're so responsible, maybe you've got a little something set aside." I folded my hands on the table. "You mean like a college fund?" His eyes flickered, but he forced another laugh. "Sweetheart, don't be like that. I told you, what's done is done. No use dwelling on the past." No use dwelling? He had robbed me. And now, with that same charm, he expected me to hand over even more. I let the silence stretch again. I knew that silence made him uncomfortable. Finally, I sighed. You know, Dad, I actually do have some money saved. His entire posture shifted, his shoulders relaxed, and his eyes lit up. That's my girl, he said, reaching across the table as if we were on the same team. See, I knew you'd understand. Just a little loan. I'll pay you back, just like I promised with the college fund. I leaned forward slightly. I just have one question. He nodded eagerly. Of course, anything. I smiled, my voice calm. Why don't you just use the money from your secret account? For the first time since I walked in, David froze. His whole body went still, and I could see the panic starting to rise in his mind. Was I bluffing? What? His laugh was strained. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table, screen facing up. I know about the account in your name, the one you didn't think I'd find. His expression twisted into something ugly, but I wasn't done. I know you've been moving money into it for years. I know that while you were borrowing from me, you were stashing money away for yourself. And I know that even after stealing my college fund, you still have enough saved to keep yourself comfortable. The color drained from his face. For once, my father didn't have a smooth comeback. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. So, tell me, Dad, why should I be the one to help you? His jaw tightened, and for the first time, I felt like I was the one in control. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. How did you find out? I smiled, feeling a sense of calm. I had help. My Aunt Rebecca, a lawyer, had assisted me in tracking everything down, and my Grandma Dorothy, his own mother, had been furious when she found out. When I first spoke to her, I had expected disappointment, but instead, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "It's time he learns what it means to face real consequences." And that's exactly what was happening right then. David's grip on his coffee cup tightened, and for the first time, his calm facade started to slip. Sophia, listen. I raised my hand to stop him, silencing him. No, you listen. I tapped the screen of my phone, showing him the open email draft, a draft addressed to my bank, clearly detailing his financial abuse. His face paled as his eyes locked on the phone. I kept my voice even and unwavering. You have two choices. 1. You pay back every single cent you stole from me. I don't care if it takes you the next 10 years. I want it all back. David swallowed hard, a muscle in his neck twitching. And the second option? I tilted my head slightly, my gaze never leaving his. I file charges: fraud, theft, financial abuse. Once I report you, the IRS will scrutinize your finances, including that secret account you've been hiding. The color drained from his face, and I could see the realization hit him. He knew. He wasn't just looking at losing money anymore. He was staring at the possibility of prison time. David had always thought he could manipulate his way out of anything. He'd always felt untouchable. But this time, he'd finally messed with the wrong person. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, never breaking eye contact. So, what's it gonna be, Dad? For the first time in his life, David was speechless, and for the first time, I felt a surge of power. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just sat there, gripping his coffee cup as though it was the only thing keeping him steady. I watched his jaw tighten and his nostrils flare. He was angry, more furious than I had ever seen him before. But it wasn't the anger of someone who had been wronged. It was the anger of someone who had just realized they'd lost control. You wouldn't do that, he finally said, his voice thick with disbelief. I raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't I? He let out a hollow, forced laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. Sophia, sweetheart, this is family. You don't go around threatening your father like this. I stared at him, my expression unwavering. You stole my future, and now you want to talk to me about family? The words hit their mark. His smirk faltered, but only for a second. David was a survivor. He had spent his entire life talking his way out of problems. Now, though, he was scrambling, desperately trying to regain control. His voice softened, shifting to that fake warmth he always used when he wanted something. Sophia, listen. I understand you're upset. I do. But this? This is going too far. I leaned in slightly, my elbows resting on the table, my tone growing firmer. Too far? Too far was stealing from me while I was in the hospital. Too far was gambling away my future and acting like it was nothing. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing him again. "Let me make myself perfectly clear," I said, my voice steady and controlled. "I'm done playing your games. I have all the evidence I need to take you down. The only reason I'm giving you a choice is because I'm being merciful. Don't mistake that for weakness." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. David looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. The daughter he had underestimated. The girl he had always thought he could manipulate forever. I let the silence stretch long enough for my words to truly sink in. Then I stood up, slipping my phone back into my pocket. "You've got 1 week," I said, my voice final. "I expect the first payment by then. If I don't get it, I make the call." I picked up my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out without a single glance back. I didn't sit around waiting for David to do the right thing. I knew him too well for that. Instead, I got to work. First, I sent copies of all my evidence to Aunt Rebecca. She had already been looking into my options, and now that I had confronted David, she was ready to move forward. "Smart move giving him a deadline," she told me over the phone. "It forces his hand. He either pays or he panics." I knew it would be the latter. Next, I made a few calls. The university's financial aid office had already been helpful, but now that I had concrete proof of financial abuse, they were more than willing to help even further. They assisted me in applying for emergency grants, and I was able to secure enough funding to cover at least 1 semester. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Then I waited. David lasted exactly 5 days before the calls began. At first, they were casual. Day 5, 10:14 a.m. "Hey kiddo, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay." I ignored it. Day 5, 3:42 p.m. "Look, Sophia, I think we should talk. There's no need to be so drastic about all this." Ignored. Day 6, 9:21 a.m. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous. You can't just cut your own father off like this." Ignored. By day 7, the desperation finally cracked through. Day 7, 11:56 p.m. "Please, Sophia, I don't have the money. I can't pay you back. Just give me some time." I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity before replying. "Time won't magically bring back my money. Find a way." His response came immediately. "David, you're being heartless." I couldn't help but laugh. Heartless? This was a man who had stolen from his own daughter while she was recovering in a hospital bed, and now he was calling me heartless? I powered down my phone and went to sleep. The next morning, my grandmother Dorothy called. "He showed up at my house last night," she said, her tone sharp with disapproval. "He tried to get me to talk to you." I clenched my jaw. "What did you tell him?" "I told him he made his bed. Now he has to lie in it." A sense of warmth spread through me. My grandmother Dorothy had always been the one person David truly feared. He had pushed boundaries with everyone else. But her? She was the one person he'd never dared to cross. Until now. "He's panicking," she continued, her voice steady. "And when David panics, he gets sloppy." She wasn't wrong. 2 hours later, I received a text from my cousin Matthew. "Matthew, yo, Uncle David just called me. Tried to get me to co-sign a loan for him." I almost dropped my phone. Co-sign a loan? David had never been this desperate. He was running out of options and he knew it. This was no longer just about my money. He was sinking and dragging anyone he could with him. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. It was time for the final phase. David thought he was the master manipulator, but now it was his turn to be the one cornered with no way out, and I was holding the key. By the end of the week, the calls from David had shifted from pleading to outright begging. He was losing his grip, and for the first time, I think he finally understood the feeling of being powerless. Day 8, 7:32 a.m. "Sophia, we need to talk. I can't come up with the money that quickly. Let's figure something out." Ignored. Day 9, 5:47 p.m. "Your grandmother Dorothy turned you against me, didn't she?" "I always knew she wanted to make me look bad." I laughed and ignored it. Day 10, 9:12 p.m. "Sophia, please, I don't have anywhere else to turn." I replied for the first time. "You had options. You chose to steal from me instead." His response came immediately. "David, it wasn't like that. You don't understand how much pressure I was under." Me. "And yet you found enough to gamble and drink away my future." David. "I swear I'll fix this. Just give me time." I stared at the message, almost hearing his smooth, practiced tone in my mind. The same voice he'd used all my life when he wanted to escape consequences. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I was about to close the trap. The next morning, I made my final move. I sent the complete documentation to my university, reinforcing my request for additional aid. Within hours, I received a response from a senior administrator. They had reviewed my case and were offering me an emergency grant to cover my remaining tuition. Step 1. Secure my future. Then, I forwarded all the evidence of my father's financial abuse, bank statements, stolen funds, and his own admissions, to my Aunt Rebecca. She called me immediately. "Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, my resolve unshaken. She let out a low whistle. "All right then, let's burn this to the ground." Step 2. Hold David accountable. The final blow came that evening. I didn't call David. I didn't text him. Instead, I sent the screenshots of his messages and proof of his secret account to our family group chat and let the fire spread. The explosion was immediate. My phone started blowing up with messages. Aunts, uncles, cousins, some in disbelief, others livid. Aunt Laura. He stole from his own daughter? Cousin Matthew. Didn't he do something similar to Grandma Dorothy a few years ago? Uncle Charles. I always knew David was bad with money, but this is insane. Within an hour, the family was in full revolt. And David? He finally cracked. He called, and this time, I picked up. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, his voice trembling with rage. I didn't say a word. I let him stew in the silence. He exhaled sharply. "You're ruining me, Sophia. Do you understand that?" I smiled, feeling an unsettling calm. "No, Dad. You ruined yourself. You don't get it." "They're turning against me," he said, his voice frantic. "My own family is cutting me off." I shrugged. "Sounds like consequences." His breath was heavy on the line. "Sophia, please, this is my life you're destroying." My fingers tightened around my phone as I thought about all the times he'd stolen from me, lied to me, and used me. And then I remembered the last time I trusted him, when he stole my future out from under me while I was lying in a hospital bed. Now, he wanted mercy? "You know what's funny, Dad?" I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. "That's exactly how I felt when you emptied my account." Silence. For the first time in my life, he had no response. No excuses left. I took a slow, deliberate breath. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." And with that, I hung up. David tried to fight back. First, he went to my grandmother Dorothy, hoping for some sympathy. She turned him away. Then, he tried convincing my mother to mediate. She laughed in his face. Desperate, he attempted to gaslight the family, spinning a story that I had exaggerated everything. But the proof I sent was undeniable. Every lie he told was immediately countered with receipts. Within days, David had lost all financial support from the family. By the end of the week, Aunt Rebecca had filed a formal demand letter. If he didn't start paying me back, we would take legal action. I heard from my grandmother Dorothy that David was scrambling, trying to find a way out. He had spent his life manipulating people, making them clean up his messes. But this time, there was no one left to save him. No one, except for himself. And for a man like David, that was the worst punishment of all. David stopped calling. After the family cut David off, and Aunt Rebecca sent the legal paperwork, the flood of desperate messages and calls finally stopped. The silence that followed was almost unsettling. Almost. But I knew how this worked. Men like David didn't just disappear. They hid, and then they schemed. So it wasn't a shock when I heard from my grandmother Dorothy a week later. "He's trying to spin the story," she said over the phone, irritation in her voice, "telling everyone that you blew this all out of proportion, that you embarrassed him just to hurt him." I laughed. "Of course he is." She sighed, clearly done with him. "You should know, he's talking about leaving town. Says he needs a fresh start. A fresh start. That was David's go-to move. Whenever things got tough, when people stopped enabling him, or when his lies finally caught up to him, he took off. It was the same thing he did when I was a kid. When his failed business ventures left us nearly homeless, he just uprooted us and disappeared into another city, pretending like nothing had happened. But this time he wasn't running from mistakes. He was running from consequences. Let him, I said flatly. I don't care where he goes, as long as he knows he's not running from this. No matter how far he runs, the legal debt remains. Every month, he'll remember me. The daughter he tried to steal from. The future he thought he could destroy. David may have fooled people before, but now his reputation was shattered, and the money that was once mine was back in my hands. The months that followed were strange. After all the time I spent fighting to reclaim what was mine, I found myself grappling with something I hadn't felt in years: peace. With David now forced to repay the money, I managed to finish my degree. The university, fully aware of my situation, helped me restructure my final semester so I could balance part-time work with my studies. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And that freedom made every sleepless night, every extra shift, and every moment of exhaustion worth it. I wasn't waiting for someone else to fix things for me anymore. More importantly, I wasn't waiting for David's approval. Then, a year later, he called me again. I let it ring, my thumb hovering over the decline button. Something in me wanted to hear what he had to say. "Sophia," he said, his voice slow and careful, hesitant. I didn't answer right away. "I heard you graduated," he continued. "That's great. I always knew you were smart." I closed my eyes. He was fishing, trying to test the waters. I didn't bite. He cleared his throat. "Listen, I was thinking maybe we should talk. Clear the air. I mean, we're still family, right?" I let out a breath, shaking my head. He hadn't changed. David wasn't apologizing. He was just waiting to see if I had softened, if I had forgotten, if I would open the door for him to sneak back in. Finally, I spoke. "No, Dad, we're not." There was silence on the other end of the line, followed by anger creeping into his voice. "Oh, so that's it? You get your little revenge, and now you think you're better than me?" I smiled, though it was without warmth. "No, Dad, I just don't need you anymore." And with that, I hung up. This time, I knew he wouldn't call again. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my grandmother Dorothy. Inside was a note written in her sharp, elegant handwriting. "I want you to know how proud I am of you. You didn't just fight back, you built something stronger from it. That's more than your father ever managed." Tucked beneath the letter was something else, a small, folded piece of paper. I opened it, and my breath caught in my chest. It was a check from her, for the exact amount David had stolen. I immediately picked up the phone. "Grandma, I can't take this." "Yes, you can," she said firmly, "and you will." "But—" "No buts, Sophia. You already earned that money once. This isn't charity. It's me making things right." Tears burned at my eyes. She sighed. "I don't want his theft to define you, sweetheart. I want you to move forward without that weight." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." She chuckled softly. "Don't thank me. Just promise me one thing." "Anything." She hesitated for a moment, then spoke with a softness I hadn't expected. "Promise me you'll never let anyone, family or not, take advantage of you again." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink deep into my heart. "I promise." And this time, I knew it was a promise I would never break. David lost everything. The family cut him off permanently. His reputation was in tatters, and every month he was reminded that I was no longer his safety net. As for me, I thrived. I built a life without him. I found success despite him. And the best part? He got to watch it all unfold, knowing he had no hand in any of it. The greatest revenge wasn't the money, it was the freedom.